Good morning. Welcome to the launch of OECD Economic Survey of Finland. We'll begin with opening remarks by Minister of Finance Riikka Purra. She will have to leave after her remarks. After that, Director Luis de Mello from the OECD will give us a presentation on the report. We'll then have time for questions from the media. My name is Tommi Tolkki. I'm a communications specialist at the Ministry of Finance. We have now a press release available on our website with a link to the report. Minister Purra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tommi. Just a second. Okay. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to everyone who has joined us here today, as well as those listening online. Today, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, is publishing its country survey on Finland. The survey looks at the Finnish economy with the aim to identify policy areas where targeted measures can enhance the economy's growth potential. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Louis and the whole OECD team for their excellent work and this comprehensive report. High-quality analysis and new ideas for reform are of utmost importance to us, especially in the current situation. The OECD report indeed includes many recommendations. However, it also acknowledges our current fiscal constraints, and I especially welcome that many of the proposed recommendations, they do not require increased public spending. The government has previously decided on consolidation, employment measures and tax increases amounting to over 9 billion euros, more than 3% of GDP. Spending cuts and tax increases have rapid impact on public finances in the short term. The structural measures enhance Finland's economic competitiveness by increasing employment, encouraging investment, and improving productivity in the medium and long term. The fiscal situation has been made more challenging by the security situation, which compels Finland to significantly increase its defense spending. By 2029, defense expenditure will be raised to at least 3% of GDP, representing a permanent increase of over 3.5 billion euros. And the new NATO requirements are on their way as well. This substantial and long-term but necessary commitment places additional pressure on public finances and underscores the urgent need for reforms that are not only effective but also fiscally sustainable. The views of the OECD and the Finnish government are very much aligned on many issues. We both recognize that economic growth is crucial, especially for the sustainability of public finances. Finland needs stronger growth, faster productivity gains, and increased supply of labor. Since the economic outlook is currently filled with uncertainty, Finland must be prepared in short term for both better and worse scenarios. The geopolitical and multilateral structures are challenged. The range of possible outcomes is wide, and the outlook for the future can change rapidly. Precisely for this reason, we need bold solutions to stimulate growth. In our recent midterm review, the government made several major decisions, including a large package of tax cuts. These actions are supported by economic research and are expected to have a positive impact on the economy. Tax cuts have been previously recommended also by the OECD precisely because Finland has one of the highest tax wedges among OECD countries. I want to highlight that this government is strongly focused on supply-side measures. These types of actions typically help reduce prices and costs, unlike demand-side measures, which often have the opposite effect. The OECD also often places emphasis on supply-side reforms. The efficient allocation of resources is another shared priority with the OECD. Improving the efficiency of public spending is one of the key recommendations in the report, and it is also a top priority for the government. I would like to mention a few recommendations from the survey that I find particularly useful. Structural reforms in higher education address Finland's most significant structural challenges, and there are several recommendations in this area. First, imposing tuition fees in tertiary education for second and further degrees at the same level is something to consider. The funding model of higher education institutes should incentivize collaboration across institutions, including greater digital education options. Then, strengthening the central government's financial steering of well-being services counties at risk of insolvency is another, which includes automatically imposing the Ministry of Finance assessment procedure on well-being counties exceeding their budget limits, and reducing state aid to firms that are not productivity enhancing. Before I invite Mr. Louis de Meyer from the OECD to present the survey, I would like to highlight the essential role the OECD plays in shaping and supporting sound economic policy. Through its in-depth country surveys and well-founded policy recommendations, the OECD offers invaluable guidance and insight that helps steer our economic strategy and structural reforms in the right direction. The OECD serves as an external voice of reason, and it is one we should listen to. Once again, thank you all very much, and I wish you all an inspiring morning. Thank you, and Louis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Minister Purra, for your words of introduction, your kind references to the OECD. Permanent Secretary Majanen, my former colleague, former Prime Minister of OECD, Mari Kiviniemi, authorities. It's a great pleasure to be back in Helsinki, despite the rain, to convey to you some of the messages from this latest economic survey of Finland. Let me turn to, I think Minister Purra has already pointed to several areas where there is a lot of alignment between our thinking and the policy priorities here in Finland. I just wanted to focus on a few aspects that we think would be helpful for you in advancing the reforms here in Finland. Let me start with the economic performance of your country over the last few years. And here we would like to stress how resilient you have been in the face of several shocks that your economy has faced. The recovery has lagged that of other OECD countries, especially your Nordic neighbors. But given the shocks that you are faced, I think the key word to take from this chart, in my mind, is one of enormous resilience. Inflation has eased since its peak in late 2022, and that's mainly due to lower oil prices, but also weak domestic demand. We expect inflation to remain moderate at the level of about 2% per year. Nominal wages have continued to grow since last year, outpacing inflation, which is good news. It's increasing the purchasing power and consumption capabilities of households. That said, your labor market remains under pressure and unemployment has edged up to about 9.5% in March. One aspect that is important to bear in mind as a driver of the outlook, and Finland is not alone in that respect, is the weakness of confidence around the OECD area. If you take, for example, the picture that you see in front of you, despite reductions in interest rates, both consumer and business confidence remain below long-term averages. By and large, what we are seeing over the next 2 years is a situation where GDP growth is projected at about 0.7% in 2025 and just slightly above 1% in 2026. This recovery in our analysis is being supported by lower interest rates following the ECB cuts from the middle of last year and rising real incomes, as I mentioned, since wages are rising faster than inflation. And that's helpful to sustain consumption and investment. We expect inflation to remain at the level of about 2% in both 25 and 26, while rising import costs will be partly offset by lower energy prices, as in other OECD countries. The unemployment rate is projected in our mind to stay around the levels of 9.1% this year and to ease slightly in 2026. There are upside risks to this scenario. In a global environment of tremendous uncertainty, one can always think of upside and downside risks. But among upside risks, we see, for example, positive spillovers from large-scale defense and industrial orders from countries like Germany and the US, which could lift output in Finland through trade with those countries. Of course, on the downside, an aggravation of current uncertainty and geopolitical tensions could put additional pressure on the economy moving forward. Let me turn now to an issue that we covered in some detail in the survey, which is about the public finances. And you heard from the minister how important it is to make sure that your public finances are in order. Here, for example, this chart shows the behavior or the patterns of budget deficits in Finland. We estimate deficits at about 4.4% of GDP last year, and that points to the importance of reducing the deficit and get debt back on a declining path. For that, we recommend the government to ramp up consolidation efforts. The reforms that were undertaken in 2023 and 2024, notably the increase in VAT and structural reforms to boost employment, were in the right direction in our analysis. Recent fiscal policy changes, including cuts to VAT on food and medicine, earned income and corporate taxation that were announced in the review that was mentioned by the minister, will slow this consolidation path that we have anticipated. Now we expect the deficit to be around 3.7% in 25 and 3.2% in 26. One of the key reasons that we see for the pressure that you are facing in the public finances is obviously an increase in population aging-related spending. And again, Finland is not alone. Other countries are facing the same type of challenge. Over the next 15 years, according to our assessment, aging costs will continue to rise. On the pension side, for example, public expenditure is already around 3% of GDP higher than in other Nordic countries. you've already made a lot of reforms over the last few years that have put the pension system on a more sustainable path. On the health side, in 2022, Finland already spent 3.8% of GDP on long-term care. This is one area where population aging puts a lot of pressure on the public finances. Encouragingly, overall long-term care spending appears to have been shifting away from very expensive institution-based care towards lower-cost, home-delivered services. However, you have to prepare for the large baby boom cohort of the population that is approaching the age of 80, which is when health and long-term care expenses per capita tended to rise very sharply. In our view, this calls for greater cost sharing by households. We would recommend that the government increase means testing while preserving access as much as possible and making sure that the risk is minimized of pushing older people into poverty. Another pressure point that was also mentioned by the minister is the rise in the costs of security following the onset of war in Ukraine. Expenditure is set to increase in Finland as the country invests in its military infrastructure, equipment, personnel, and other related spending. Let me turn to an issue that is also an important aspect of the work presented in the survey, and it has to do with higher educational attainment in your country. Finland's higher education attainment rate among the young age cohort has stagnated over the last 20 years. This, for us, is an area of concern because the younger cohorts of the population are now less educated than their older counterparts. The higher education system is of high quality in Finland, and we all acknowledge that. But demand for places in higher education institutions still outstrips supply. The supply of places is obviously constrained by the public finances because the system is about 90% publicly funded, and there is a strong public opinion opposition to tuition fees. We believe that further increasing places for younger students requires continuing to work on two main fronts. One is to increase efficiency in the matching of places with students, and obviously what markets are demanding, and at the same time increasing resources for more places through new funding sources. The minister herself mentioned the issue of matching when she referred to our recommendation to, for example, applying tuition fees for second degrees at the same level. And we know that because market shows and research shows that second degrees at the same level do not necessarily improve labor market conditions. We argue then that this policy move could increase the efficiency of the system in increasing educational attainment at that level. Another issue that was also raised by the minister is the collaboration between industry and higher education institutions. In Finland, collaboration is of high quality, also another aspect of your system that we acknowledge. But it appears to be underutilized, with relatively low business funding for R&D at the level of higher education institutions. I mean, obviously, as in other countries, an important barrier to that is insufficient research capacity among firms. But we also know from the experience of other countries that university graduates joining industry, so that flexibility of higher education students to already have experience at the level of industry is one of the main channels that can be used to transfer knowledge between higher education institutions and industry. Let me move to a related issue that we also spend some time in the service talking about, which is about attracting and retaining more high-skilled workers. If you look at this chart, you see that the trends in immigration in Finland are very encouraging. It shows how attractive your country is to foreign-born, highly educated individuals. And this is a very good development because you can count on that pool of knowledge to complement your own human capital when it comes to preparing the economy better for innovation and for higher productivity-based growth. We see that Finland has taken very important steps with initiatives such as the Talent Boost program, and more recently by streamlining the residence permit process. But obviously, challenges remain. While more foreigners now study in Finland, retention rates remain relatively low, with about 1 in 3 immigrant students leaving the country after graduation. There are several reasons for that. One is limited professional experience during their study years that would help them find employment after graduation. That's why we believe that strengthening cooperation between firms, universities, and local governments is essential to increase retention and build lasting connections with those students who come to Finland. Language is another often mentioned obstacle for retaining foreign students. Fewer than half of immigrants in Finland are proficient in Finnish or Swedish, while many employers require fluency in those two languages. To deal with that, we argue that expanding language training programs tailored to higher skilled professionals would help in the direction of increasing retention, but also from the point of view of longer-term integration of those individuals in your society. We also believe that encouraging more flexible workplace language practices could open doors for many skilled workers currently on the sidelines. Broader efforts, for example, better educational and work opportunities and support for immigrant children and spouses could also make your country even more attractive to foreign talent. And let me turn to the final point that we make in the economic survey, where Finland has enormous potential over the next few years, and it has to do with the acceleration of decarbonization or the transition to net zero. If you look at this chart, your country is very ambitious in its targets to reduce gross emissions of greenhouse gases, but you are not on target, unfortunately, to meet net zero by 2035. And the main problem here is not that you are not making enough effort in several areas of your economy. You've actually achieved to reduce the carbon intensity of the Finnish economy over the years. But the land use and forest sector is a case that deserves some attention. Recent re-estimations, for example, of the carbon content of the sector shows that if you take into account forest soil emissions, the outcome of that is that the land use and forest sector, instead of being a natural carbon sink, has actually become a net emitter of greenhouse gases over the years. So this is a challenge that is somewhat specific to Finland, given that you are one of the most forested countries in the OECD. About 75% of your territory is covered with forests. So if you look at the challenges that you face in this area, what we would suggest that you do is that lowering emissions in or from land use and forests would probably be the least expensive way forward to decarbonize your entire economy. And one special area in this respect is what you do about emissions from peatlands. We argue that better forest management is a huge opportunity for Finland, but seizing it is complex. So turning forests back into a carbon sink will take a mixture of regulation, public policy, and voluntary carbon credit markets that could encourage faster decarbonization in that sector. Re-wetting peatlands is especially effective as it stops soil from decomposing, which would then reduce the amount of emissions associated with methane that are very dominant in that part of the economy. Finland is also becoming a hub for green industry activities supported by advanced electricity grid infrastructure that you have and a very skilled labor force when it comes to the type of talent demanded in the green industrial transformation. As you can see from this chart, if you combine your potential for wind and solar power, some estimates pointed to about 200 times that you can produce from those sources alone than its current electricity production. Even if only a fraction of this potential is realized, it would support a massive expansion of clean energy, with wind alone expected to provide nearly half of your electricity by 2030. Not many countries in the OECD are as blessed as you are in that respect, so it is an asset that you can use to help your transition. Also, you have one of the lowest electricity prices in Europe, which gives you a very important competitive edge. However, one point that we make in our analysis is that although electricity prices are low, price volatility is very high, and that's essentially, what happens given the share of renewables that you have in your energy matrix. So we argue that to safeguard your competitive edge and reduce price volatility, you would do well to scale up investment in grid infrastructure, interconnections, and also energy storage to deal with the intermittency challenge of those new renewable sources of energy. Public funding alone will not be enough to deliver the scale and the pace of investment that is required for your green energy transition. Unlocking the potential that you have in this area will then require mobilizing more private capital, particularly for scaling up low emissions technologies and energy-intensive production across the EU value chains. Policy efforts in this area should reduce investment risk through public-private partnerships, seed capital, and guarantees, for example, which is the type of policies and instruments that other countries are using to achieve the same objective. We also argue that improving emissions accounting to reflect the full life cycle benefits of new technologies would help to unlock private investment. This should go together with making better use of EU funding instruments, which can help to de-risk strategic projects and crowd in private capital for that purpose. Finland, as in other countries, faces an issue or a challenge related to biodiversity, and that's the last point I would like to share with you today based on our analysis. As in many countries, biodiversity is at risk from land use changes, including construction of roads, new energy sources, factories, and so on. Ensuring biodiversity is not further compromised by land use and climate change requires balancing diverse and sometimes competing interests. That's the case in your Arctic area, where this challenge is probably more obvious than in other parts of your country, where biodiversity is under most pressure from climate change and land use objectives as well. There will always be trade-offs here and in other countries about land use choices. But we argue that biodiversity should really be given a greater weight when assessing those trade-offs. Experience shows that legislating climate mitigation goals has created the pressure to act. That's why we recommend legislating biodiversity goals as well, so as to put biodiversity on a more level footing with economic development as you make your choices about how to use the land that you have at your disposal. I just wanted to conclude this presentation. I hope that some of these elements that we try to put on the table in this survey will be helpful in informing policy choices that you will make. We are very encouraged to see the resilience of the Finnish economy over the last few shocks that you have faced. That shows that resilience is a fabulous asset in your country. And we see at the same time the enormous potential that you have in terms of the transition to a net zero carbon economy. The international context is very challenging, but you have lots of assets that can be made the most of in that journey. And we are happy to support you in that process as well. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mikko.
Thank you. Now it's time for questions from the media. We have a question from Erik Sandström, YLE News. Please wait for the microphone. Go ahead. Thanks.
Erik Sandström, public broadcaster, Yle. Riikka Purra, the Minister of Finance, mentioned in her opening remarks that the OECD has previously recommended that Finland lowers its tax rates. Now you come with criticism concerning the recent decisions of lowering these tax rates. How do you comment on this?
I wouldn't put it as a criticism. This is a decision that has been taken in Finland. What we are saying in this regard is that, yes, while lower revenues would change the path of consolidation that we have originally projected, we recommend that the government should maintain its efforts towards consolidation in the future. If growth disappoints during this process, we expect the government then to take the necessary action to make sure that the public debt trajectory of Finland is put durably on a downward path. That's our key message in terms of the public finances. You are not alone in having very challenging public finances. Other OECD countries are in the same position. The situation in most of OECD countries since the pandemic has been one of much higher levels of debt than we had before. At the same time, as I mentioned, population aging, further need for defense spending are putting additional pressure on the defense side, on the expenditure side. What we are saying in this area is that it's very important to signal the direction of travel, which is the one of making sure that debt is put on a declining path over time. Lots of reforms beyond the public finances would help in this respect. That's why we put so much emphasis on pro-growth reforms as well. Making sure that while you consolidate, you are creating the conditions for job creation, for investment. You are making the most of your comparative advantages in so many areas that we mentioned in the survey. That would be a complementary path as well. Ensuring the consolidation of the public finances is not only about acting on spending and revenue, on the spending and revenue sides of the budget. It's also making sure that you implement the structural reforms that are known to be good for growth and to expand the supply side of your economy.
Thank you. Any other questions from the media? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the second part of this event, a panel discussion moderated by Permanent Undersecretary Leena Mörttinen. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tommy, and good to see you all. Welcome on my behalf as well. I have this excellent honor to chair a panel, and I hope that the panelists agree. We didn't plan this beforehand. We didn't talk at all before, except David and I a bit. So let's keep this really, not sticking to a list of questions, but speak freely. So I have a great honor of inviting to the stage Ms. Saara Kujala, please. Mr. Mika Maliranta, Ms. Heidi Schauman, and Mr. David Ho. Yeah, please. Oh, yeah, I guess I'm supposed to stand here and not take David's chair. So yeah, that's okay. Works better that way anyway. We have slides as well available still, so we can perhaps flip through them if David can ask for a picture if you want to. The name of the panel is Firming Up Clean Growth. And it's an important debate, and we just finished off with that. But before kicking off the actual discussion, I better introduce our panelists. Ms. Saara Kujala is the Chief Executive Officer at the Nordic Rengas Limited. Saara has over 15 years of experience in international project development and business development in the energy sector, a key sector. Saara holds a degree of Master of Science in Production Economics. Then we had Mr. Mika Maliranta. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Labore. Mika is also Professor of Economics at the Turku School of Economics. Previously, he has also worked as Research Director at ETLA and Research Professor at the Finnish Competition and Consumer Authority. Mika is also a member of the Finnish Productivity Board, and he has his PhD from the Helsinki School of Economics. Ms. Heidi Schauman is a Global Head of Research at the banking group Danske Bank. Previously, she has worked as Chief Economist of Swedbank's Finnish operations, as well as Chief Economist of Aktia, and before that in Bank of Finland and Nordea. So really good banking experience. A lot of banking questions coming to you. Her PhD is from Hanken School of Economics. And finally, I have a great honor of having David Ho here. We have had a pleasure of discussing things a couple of times. Excellent economist, the senior economist at the Finland and New Zealand desk at the OECD. David is a New Zealand citizen and worked at the New Zealand Treasury. David's PhD is from the Australian National University. So warm welcome to all of you. So let's check the time first, because I will have to stop at 11:30. I'm trying to maintain myself and not start speaking for you, so rather asking questions may be difficult. So, but if you can, keep your intervention short. So that, and please, comment each other, be provocative, and we take it from there. Let's start from sort of warming up thing first. So now I'll start with you, Saara. Tell us a bit what your company Nordic Rengas does, and what kinds of investments have you made or are planning to make? I hope you are planning to make them. So please, go ahead.
Just checking the microphone. So thanks for the question. As a founder of a startup company, it's a dangerous question to ask me to give an elevator pitch on what we do. I try to keep it short. But indeed, we are a company focusing on the emerging hydrogen economy. Rengas is planning an investment portfolio of over 4 billion euros in Finland on renewable hydrogen projects that we are also then firming further into renewable e-methane. So it's a complementary product of biomethane, which will be used in heavy road transportation and marine segments where the direct electrification it's not possible in the same way as in electric passenger vehicles. What makes our projects super interesting and different is that we plan them in collaboration with Finnish municipal energy companies so that they can utilize the waste heat of the production to decarbonize their own network, so both reducing use of fossil fuels but also reducing biomass-based fuels, thereby also supporting wider biodiversity, which was also a topic of this report. We also work our project in a very flexible manner, supporting also the electricity price fluctuations and actually making an interesting business model out of it. So supporting also the grid in that way. first investment is to start this year.
Excellent. So on that positive note, Heidi, what opportunities do you see for improving the business environment and fostering innovation in Finland? And looking at Sarah, speak to her.
I actually thought I would start with a little bit reflecting on the OECD report that I've been spending a lot of time with during the past days. And one thing that I really think that we're lacking when I compare to the other Nordics, but also many other countries, is the collaboration between universities and the private sector. I think we're taking great steps on the collaboration between public sector and policy and education, higher education, but really building those fundamental links. How do we get the R&D into production, in a sense, the bright minds, the ideas that we have? And I think there's so many low-hanging fruits there, so that's definitely something we need to explore, but also acknowledge that needs some kind of structure, that how do we actually do it? And it's not only financing PhDs, it's actually how do we get professors to want to work in companies for a specific time and then go back? How do we get that kind of system? And it's not easy, I would say, but that's something we would really, really need.
That's a really good point, and it goes directly to productivity question, which is for Mika. How do you see productivity development in the future? And don't give away everything they're going to say later, so just a bit of a taster.
First, thank you for the invitation. As it comes to next a couple of years, I think it's highly likely that there will be a productivity growth acceleration. The reason is that we now have a slowdown in economy, and it's quite typical that when there is a recovery period, actually there is acceleration in productivity growth. But from the point of view of Finnish economy, more important question is what happens in productivity after that. And as it comes to the productivity growth during the next 5 or 10 years, I see reasons to believe optimistic. We will come back to this, but to put briefly, we have so-called catching up potential. Our productivity level of Finnish business sector declined during after 2010. And so we are actually behind Sweden and Denmark. And I'm pretty confident that our business sector is able to be almost as productive as Finland, Sweden and Denmark.
Excellent, looking forward to that. And now David, of course, give some positives on Finland, please.
Okay. That's a difficult question because there's so many positives. But I want to concentrate on a kind of a combination, which I think is the big strength of Finland. And that is, Louise talked a lot about the electricity potential in Finland. And that's one thing. But you need something else to turn that into goods and services. And Finland has that. Finland has a long history of industrial development, and particularly in wood processing, that it can draw on a deep pool of engineering experience. It has a pipeline of companies like Sarah's here, and that allows the possibility to transform this electricity into high-value products and services, and to, at the same time, move into that net zero transition. So that's the big strength I see, the combination of that engineering excellence and scientific capacity and cheap electricity.
Excellent, thank you, David. Yeah, we could continue on this positive, and actually I'll try to save it to the last and start here in the between before we get to the last bits of things. Let's go to the negative side, which is the geopolitics and geoeconomics of the world. I mean, we were so engaged in discussing the ESG and hoping that, the green transition would be the major talk point on every economist table around the world, and now we are actually discussing defense mainly. But it's the sign of the times that you can't help, but nonetheless, things will have to be kept moving while we try to make sense of this and, of course, secure our own neighborhood as well. So, please, all of you, reflect on that, but perhaps David could kick it off. What would be the OECD recommendations in this challenging geo-economic and geopolitical environment for a small open economy, which is definitely sort of on a weaker side in playing these games for sure.
Okay, so I guess it's fairly obvious, but I mean, one of the key strategies really is diversification, diversification, diversification. Finland has to work harder to work with like-minded countries to build its trading relations. The reality is that it is it's becoming a less globalized world, but there's still a lot of other countries out there, not just in Europe, that still want to trade, that still believe in a free trading system. My own, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Korea. There's many other members of the OECD that outside the EU that still embrace free trade and want to trade. So I think it's about having to, I mean, that's one of the key strategies. It's not the first best, but that's what Finland has to do. It's going to have to work harder, like all other small OECD countries.
Work harder, yeah. We are good at that, and of course, Finns, while not always optimists, we have that certain fighting spirit. So I think you are right there. We can also we are very well defending ourselves already, our borders. So I think that's an example to others as well. I like your bit of optimism that you dropped in already in the beginning. So I think you have commented Trump's tariff policy, Mika. And while not, the growth expectations may not look the best at the moment, could you elaborate a bit why you are not as pessimistic? And as you said, there's a catch-up potential here. So now you can elaborate.
Yeah, certainly. Let me correct a little bit. I think I said that for a small open country like Finland, increasing tariffs is of course very harmful. And it's particularly harmful for a small open country that actually has just recovered from the economic disasters or the technological negative shock. So this is clear that this is not a positive thing. But I think I said that I believe that actually tariffs will be a little bit lower than it appeared to be in those days, because Trump has a struggle with market forces, and I believe market forces. So market forces keep the tariffs reasonable. And so I also believe that Finnish economy is actually pretty flexible. When the tariffs are reasonable, we are able to adapt. So, but of course, this is bad news. So I expect that there are delays in positive growth period, and clearly it is if the tariffs stay high, our growth will be lower than it would be without these increases. So, but I'm still optimistic because we have a lot of catching up potential. A part of it would be a nice thing to have.
Can I comment a little bit that when we meet a lot of companies across Finland, but also the Nordics, the general perception is that so many of our companies were really well prepared for this. Many say it's Russia, many say it's the pandemic, but generally I would say that we get a sense that it wasn't such a big surprise. And those that are more affected, that still we've tried to look at all the bigger Finnish companies, company by company, they are not worse affected than their competitors in other countries. And tariffs or all kinds of trade barriers is still a relative game, right? So we're also quite optimistic actually that short term this is not something that will destroy us. There are many other strong forces that are also pushing us down, right? But long term, of course, less global trade is poison for a small open global economy like Finland. But we're not as open as Sweden and Denmark, so maybe we're a little protected there.
Could be. Really good point. Would you like to comment, Mika and Heidi, the OECD recommendations as well while you are at it? Heidi, will you continue?
The recommendations on
this fragmented world. I mean, how to react to that. I think David already said, but do you have any comments on specifically in the report?
I agree very much on this diversification, but maybe preparing a little bit and going deeper into this, that where could all this escalate? Could we end up in a situation where we're not able to trade with both China and the US, for instance? So far, I see that all the Nordics have gone full speed with the ideology that we're trading with everyone and globalization is a fantastic thing. When we see trade slow down between many countries in the world, the Nordics have just continued to trade more. So we've gone a little bit in the other direction than everyone else. And so far, it's played out well because no one has really squeezed us, but that could come. And then on company level, I actually think that we're not prepared well enough for that. So if you compare to American companies, many are actually more prepared on, okay, so who could we play with if we can't play with these guys? So in that sense, I think we would need to do some more planning on, okay, so if China or the US is excluded, who are our friends then? Is it India? Is it the global south more generally? Do we stick to Europe? What does that mean for investments and growth plans going forward? So there I think we need to plan more for different kind of scenarios. But at the same time, as a company, you can't just wait and sit, and see what will happen. You have to invest, you have to make bold calls. And that's maybe a big risk in Finland as well, that we are quite cautious compared to many, that there's a risk if we do not put our cards on something, then that is also a choice.
Sure. No, good point.
I have
Mika?
nothing to add to that.
Nothing to add. That was perfect answer. Now, Sarah, how does the world look to you? I mean, it's always interesting. I mean, economists, we can talk about this forever on a macro level, but really having to live the life in this fragmented world. Do you feel it yet? How the geoeconomics is pressuring you, or?
Yeah, well, we are a company with a very clear mission, one business goal on first making the investment decision and start to construct our first project and the next one. So yeah, it's very down to earth and kind of day to day. I think so far what's really good, and I think it was brought out also in the report, that Finland has a lot of benefits, and it is a business opportunity to move to the net zero world, and the green transition overall brings us a lot of opportunities. And I think we are seeing this strong commitment from the EU side, and I think also in the past years, like countries like the US have had different opinions about whether the climate change is real and how to react to that. But Europe has always been very consistent on bringing down the emissions, so that's very good for us. But of course, all the kind of the uncertainty, it brings also uncertainty to our investors and counterparties. We don't see it as like a concrete worries, but of course, I'm 100% sure that in everybody's mind, it's the second thought that, hey, how secure is this business case? What are the risks involved? Will it be resilient enough to bring sufficient return over the long term in various scenarios? So that's, of course, the work that we do.
So do you feel the pressure already as regards investments on the funding side, that investors are more careful? And then going back to the OECD recommendations, I think there was mentioning of government-backed financial mechanisms, that those would be useful. Would you comment that?
Yes, well, I think Finland has done a lot of positive things already to support green investments and the green transition. Of course, it's all starting from maybe the kind of natural resources in a way that we have good wind conditions and we have good potential to invest in low-cost renewable energy. So in a way, the kind of green hydrogen, renewable electricity could be a similar raw material for a new industry as forestry has been 100 years ago when it started. And I think Finland has done a good job on building a regulatory framework to support that. I think the key thing for the investors is to have the sufficient certainty that it will remain and there's the stability. So I think for the time being, the investors are very much supporting, and they want to have that certainty on the framework. I think then there was the other question on the public elements, and yeah, I can comment maybe more later on, but in general, in a new industry, in a new business, it's the company's job to build a business case, but then all the support to kind of reduce the risks related to it is highly valuable.
Indeed. We'll come back to the investment and financing, in particular side of the reliance on bank financing later on, so Heidi can start thinking about that already. But before we do that, everybody's favorite topic is public finances. And of course, we know the really difficult situation in Europe, and Finland is not alone. I mean, the defense spending needs to increase, and the figures are staggering. And at the same time, there is aging population everywhere in Europe, and Finland is feeling that quite a bit as well. This is particular to David and Heidi and Mika, but Sara, feel free to comment. It's always good to comment something that is not your expertise area, because then you can really let it rip. So
key to success, you know.
So listen to everybody, and then you can take the floor. The high deficit and increasing public debt. I mean, they are significant challenges, and this lack of economic growth, and it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. You have COVID, and then you have Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. And then there are huge political changes on the other side of the Atlantic that have an effect as well, which is going to hurt everybody, of course, on the tariff policy side, but it particularly feels in Finland because we are also aging population. It really feels bad. So what concretely, could you summarize again, although we already heard the summary of the measures, the OECD recommendations do promote being more efficient on the spending side. So how do you see that? I mean, this balancing act of trying to keep up the confidence and at the same time needing to correct the inefficiencies in the system, particularly in the public spending.
Okay, so I guess maybe I guess we have, as Luis referred to, several levers which we think are important to look at. One of them is public sector efficiency. Another is to always be looking at your tax system and the revenue side and making sure that that's as efficient as possible. So on the VAT side, we're always advocating for as few kind of concessionary rates as possible. There's always the economic case that you can help people on lower incomes through income transfers rather than through VAT, which then spreads the benefits to parts of the population that don't need it. On the public sector efficiency, I guess, one area that we've looked into the most is in the higher education sector there, and a lot of the recommendations there are really about trying to get more for the same euros, and that's why we recommended the tuition fees for second degrees at the same level, and also complementary. It's not just about putting fees there, it's also giving people a choice other than doing a second bachelor's degree. So there's a real need to build out that range of other postgraduate shorter qualifications and things. So, I mean, that's sort of some specific kind of things where we see that there's room to increase public sector efficiency in that area. But yeah, I guess more generally, there needs to be sort of that kind of review done regularly across every part of the government's finances. And then it comes down to which ones you're going to choose. That's a political decision. That's, balancing out, because there's always going to be trade-offs here about, where are you going to put your money? And so that's where sort of the OECD advice stops, and the political side has to come in.
Exactly. Mika, Heidi, comments and feel free.
I think it's very important to remember one of the lessons of the economic growth literature that says that actually high tax rates do not necessarily kill the long-term growth. The essential question is how do you tax and how do you spend the revenues? If we look at, for example, Sweden and Denmark, they have had remarkable success during past 2 decades. And if you look at the average tax rates during that period, it has been very high. So this is something that you need to keep in mind. And then I agree that there is a definitely need for fiscal corrections, consolidation. So the problem is that sometimes if you do it in the wrong way, and I think bad mistakes were made about 10 years ago in Finland. They have saved money. There was a decline in education expenditure. That was a bad decision. But of course, we can correct those decisions. And I liked a lot OECD study. They emphasized a lot the need to spend money to education and increase the education level, because it is important for the long-term economic growth, and it's also good news for the fiscal deficit, because long-term economic growth helps this here a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Heidi.
Yeah, maybe I can continue on that I'm not the biggest tax expert in this room, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut on that. But on the education side, I agree that I was surprised. That was maybe what I was most surprised by in this OECD report, that how dramatic the shift has been in how big chunk of the population actually get a higher education. That is just something that has to be reversed. But I also support the idea of actually starting to charge some form of fee for additional educations. Just own experience, I have multiple friends that have taken the second or third degree because it's fun. I'm interested in history, or I just want to study to become a nurse, but I actually don't want to work. We need to get rid of that.
Finland is the happiest country in the world.
Yeah. So that maybe creates a lot of happiness, but to what price? And then I would maybe go back to that I'm really happy that people are engaged with education, but maybe not with taxpayers' money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mika, go ahead.
We have the challenge in funding education, and I don't take a position. Those just suggestions were interesting. What I'm thinking about, that devil is in the details. And how do you arrange the whole package? Because you need to take into account student loans and this kind of arrangements, and look at the whole package, how it is working. So. But I think because education is so important, and because we have so big problems with our deficits, we need to be open for different solutions. So good idea, perhaps.
Sarah, how do you see, the role of education, and particularly happiness versus just doing it and biting the bullet and making things grow? I mean, how do you balance things?
Well, I agree, Heidi. It was similar to me, the biggest surprise of the report, and somehow like contradictory how I have seen always my country to be with high education, with lots of possibilities. And of course, it like looking ahead now from my very very limited down to earth view on the business outlook. We are building new industry. We are already now actually nicely. Very actively being approached by Finnish education, like the university or higher vocational schools, on how we can collaborate. But definitely with the new industry, we need new skills. We will need to train our own workforce. But on the other hand, the private companies cannot do it alone, and it should also benefit all the other companies who are building similar frameworks. So like super important thing, and really glad that through this report it got such a big attention also.
Yeah, excellent. The international specialist side of things is important, and some of you have already indicated that's key. Now I'm sort of struggling myself a bit of how tough of a nation are we going to become, also because of the tougher we are, the less attractive we are. And it is interesting to travel around the world, and every time I meet people from other places, they usually know that we are very happy. Now, I mean, attractive international space, I mean, world is a cruel place. It is really, really not kind place, and the value systems are really, really getting hard. So there is something to maintain in Finland as well, but what are other ways to attract international specialists than just repeating that we are very happy?
I think international specialists have a way of communicating with each other, so they don't go places that they know nothing about. And I think one of the key problems we have is that it's hard to build a career as an international expert that doesn't speak Finnish. So you could get that one job, that is great, but then, next steps. That is really, really, really hard. And we also see many foreigners that they would love to somehow stay, but it's really hard to build a life here, to become a part of our society. And there we're not alone. All the Nordics are really, really bad at that. And I would say the US, well, they've done a lot of mistakes lately, but they have championed that when you walk over the border, you somehow become a part of society. But we're still in the mode that, well, your family has had to live here for 200 years, and you're still not really part of our small society here. And you have to speak our language, and you have to that and that, you have to have our dialect. And it's very small and very local. And somehow we as people have to open up to the thought that, well, we won't do that. And I would see what I see in the workplace, it's really a choice. Do we teach all international experts Finnish, or do we start talking English? And now we have this odd mix that, yes, we recruit international people, but then they sit there in the desk and everyone talks Finnish around them. Like, yeah, that's really inclusive. But it's a difficult choice. And I see it everywhere. Now I work at a Danish company, and in Denmark we have a lot more international people. So now it starts to be a little bit that people talk more and more English, but you realize there has to be a critical mass. Mm-hmm. And if you just take one, nothing changes. That person will leave really soon. But if you take 10, things might change. But it doesn't really work that you have different islands of people talking different languages. So it is a big shift in thinking that do we accept English-speaking workplaces, or do we actually teach people? And then that's a lot of teaching, because Finnish is really hard. I know as a Swedish-speaking person.
That's so true. And actually one of the advantages in US is that you can speak English. So it's really easy to integrate there, and we all know US culture from TV shows
exactly.
as well. So
yeah.
I mean, it's sort of all around us. So it's a cultural thing as well. But Mika, go ahead.
When I read this report, one of the biggest surprise was when I saw statistics that show that how attractive Finland is. And this was good news. And the reason that is good news because we have problems with our technological level. We need technological knowledge. We need definitely skilled workers, and highly skilled foreign employees. Actually, they bring sometimes or quite often technology into our country, into our firms. And even when they leave, some of the knowledge stays there. So mobility is important, international mobility. Of course, the challenge is how to encourage this kind of people to come here. So highly skilled professionals. So I hope the government will find new techniques or new policies for that, because we need that.
Indeed. On the other hand, there is also a lot of movement now happening, people moving from one side to another, from other side, one side of an Atlantic perhaps to this side as well. So there are a lot of opportunities to attract talent if we just get on with it. So it's an interesting debate to have of what are the exact measures and how to promote yourself in a world where everybody promotes themselves at the moment. So everybody wants the talent. So a bit of a competition there. Now, Sara, do you want to comment? Where do you find talent?
First of all, I fully agree with you said, Heidi, and I just wanted to add on that in addition to how people are made feel welcome, I think it's more cultural. It's a wider question. Just having the high-skilled workers here, I think as humans we need to have that same attitude to everybody, and it's not possible to see by looking at someone whether it's which level of the cooperation or work life they are. So that's also an important aspect to consider, to make people to feel welcome and make people to want to stay in this country. And maybe for our companies, point of view, well, for the time being, we are not a great example of that. We are still a very small team. We are still a very Finnish team. And I really hope that we will grow to be big, international, and be also like go through that shift of from being a very Finnish team to being an international team. But of course, already now, lots of our partners are mainly European companies, but definitely like building that network and value chain, whether it's technology providers, investors, supply demand side partners. And I believe it's through those networks that we also gain knowledge already now on how to do things and how to do them better in our next projects, but also on probably the most logical avenues of finding the right people to work with and have part of our team.
Indeed. Mika, go ahead.
I fully agree that there is a need to change attitudes, but the important question, what government should do? We need policy actions, and should we use subsidies or tax solutions to encourage? And the economic argument for that kind of policy measures is that those kind of people bring new knowledge into our country. And actually there are positive some system that when more, as you had mentioned, that when more people come here, it actually also the attitude change for that. So, but I believe that we need some further policy actions from the government as well.
Very good. David, you're from New Zealand, and weirdly, I feel closeness to you because you're an island and far away. So you must have similar discussions, or do you? And how do you see that?
I guess the debate's very different because we have like a lot more migration as a percentage of the population is much higher, and we just have this natural advantage that it's English speaking, and I think that. I think that is a huge thing. So, you know, most people, they're coming with some capacity to already speak the local language. And so, I mean, and looking at this issue, I mean, when we started off, it was kind of like, is Finland attractive? What do we need to do to make Finland attractive? But I think as we went through the process, it became more obvious that actually Finland's is an attractive country, and people want to come here. The challenge is to keep them when they come, I think. I mean, that's our assessment. And obviously, yeah, the language side is definitely an issue. I mean, I speak French and some German and some Spanish, and you know, learning those is like just trying to say any Finnish words as an English speaker is tricky. So it is a hard language to learn, and that is like, I guess, obvious, but it is a big barrier to keeping people here, I guess. I think that's a really interesting question about the workplace culture and whether you want to switch or not. I think that is a key issue. Yeah, that's something that. As a society, you have to make a choice about that, I guess. Coming from an international organization, it seems very natural. I mean, we have 38 member countries. English is the kind of, even though officially we're bilingual French, English is the dominant language of the OECD. But then, I don't know, it seems to mix fine. You'll hear people, the Spanish speakers will be speaking in Spanish when there's just the Spanish people there and the Germans and things. So, and then when there's English is the only common language, then it switches to English. So I don't know whether it can be accommodated actually without losing, you know, the Finnish communication, which is important. And I mean, one aspect about that is that like the French people will tell me at work, I don't know how to talk about financial markets in French because we talk about it in English all the time. And then the Poles would say the same and so forth. So there is something about, you know, if you want to keep your professional Finnish, you have to have conversations at work in Finnish as well. So somehow you have to maybe have both, you know, kind of that when there's somebody there that doesn't understand Finnish, okay, the conversation switches to English, but you need maybe, if you want to retain, to be able to talk about like professional things. You'll have to keep Finnish as a language of work as well.
Oh, that's true. And you, by the way, have one advantage over us. In addition to the language, other things come with it. And you were, I mean, Peter Jackson, oh my God, and Lord of the Rings. How many are fans? Show of hands in the audience as well, bravely. Yeah, we quote it in tables all the time. Half of our speeches are now about the Lord of the Rings. So and the way Peter Jackson adapted it. So good job, and New Zealand looks lovely. Oh my God, everybody wants to go there. I think we have great directors, but we have this certain gloominess about things. It really is good for me, but not everybody loves it. So perhaps we can think about adaptations, but in English perhaps not. So there's a bit of an advantage that you definitely have, and it surely is the language. Now, I mean, just getting back on track and not going completely on tangent here, the business funding in research, I think you commented that in the OECD report as well. Let's do a bit of a round on that as well. David, would you describe the situation in Finland according to OECD analysis?
Okay, so I mean, on this is the business funding of the universities. So I think that there is, as Louise mentioned, a very strong kind of base there of collaboration, and it is high quality, and there has been a tradition of this, especially when Nokia was bigger, and the decline of Nokia has kind of contributed to sort of a reduction in that collaboration. So I think it's like the higher education sector more generally. You know, it's very high quality, and it's about trying to kind of get more out of that system, really, and to build. And it is about building a bridge between the business sector and higher education. And for that, you need, as Louise said, like an absorptive capacity in firms to be able to do that. And on the other side, you need like higher education institutions to be able to know what firms need. And so I think it's, you know, you need kind of to build a network there, and physical proximity matters. And so I think like Aalto University is a very nice example of this. They have kind of firms around them, you know, they're big, very successful university. And so you need to be able to attract the firms to you as well. That's easier for Aalto to do because it's big, it's internationally connected. Finland has a large network of higher education institutes across the country. Some of them are smaller. And there, I think, you know, the challenge is to be able to attract firms. And there, we advise to specialize more, to build a deeper pool of talent in particular areas that not every university can do every field if you want to maintain this regional kind of spread, and that's got its advantages. So, and then finally, I think, you know, don't want to get too obsessed with that kind of link between business and just the kind of, how can I put it, the applied research. It's also important to have that blue skies research there, because that's the building blocks for these collaborations in the end. I mean, the most famous example that we all know about after COVID's RNA, right? I mean, they invented RNA technology 30 years before COVID. Nobody knew what to do with it, and that's the basis of the vaccines. So, I mean, it's, so the government has a role here to continue to fund sort of basic research, as well as the PhD program. I think, you know, the policy's going in a good direction here. I mean, the government's decided to fund more PhD places. Those PhD places are supposed to be attached to firms and things. So I think it's about kind of, you know, implementing those programs is important. And also the public R&D spending is going up as well. So I think in this area, you know, the government's pulling the right levers to build this collaboration, but it's going to take it's going to take time. I think that's the other thing too. Don't expect this to occur in 1 year or 2 years. I mean, these are long-term projects.
Indeed. Mika Kai.
Collaboration between firms and universities as it comes to education and research is absolutely important. One is one of the reasons is those financial reasons. The other reason that I already mentioned, that actually collaboration between universities and firms encourage technological diffusion in the economy. And this is economic literature shows that technology diffusion is very important for the productivity growth in the long term. So this is definitely one of the areas where the government has role to play. Of course, firms do collaborate with universities anyway, but actually the government has incentives to encourage them to do a little bit more collaboration because it's beneficial to the total economy. Again, we have economic arguments from economic literature that shows that government has a role to play.
And maybe adding to university funding, that I think we do have still space to also see the corporate sector, for instance, sponsoring professorships, and so more than what we've seen. We've seen a lot of foundations supporting that, but I think we could see more activity from the corporate sector as well. But there's also a downside, and this is completely anecdotal. In Denmark, they've done a change to the PhD system in some way, because we've had a massive amount of people that would like to do a PhD in economics, but say that, oh, but we don't get a position unless we have a corporate sponsor that pays for it. And I think that is really unfortunate, that you yourself have to go out and somehow find a company that will be your sponsor. I have a guy in my team that is doing his PhD for the University of Copenhagen, but he was found that the university found him, and we had said that, yes, we are co-sponsoring it, and we want that person to use our own spending data for academic research and giving access to that. But now something seems to have changed, and then I think that there are a lot of dangers actually here, that by also pushing the private sector too much into the university funding, you can get it all wrong. But this is just anecdotal. It might be that it's just one university or something trying something out, but it just hit me that, oh, this is not good. And it takes up a lot of time.
Oh, indeed.
They will see details.
Yeah. Sarah, perhaps we can take a bridge back to the bigger issues, but please comment this as well. I mean, describing what your company does sounds very innovative, and also you probably have your own IPR and technology developed. What is your relationship to the university? Do you have a home university that was sort of inspiring you and your team to make this into a startup? And what is the relationship? I mean, you are probably not at the stage to yourself, fund research on a university level, but there are other interconnections as well.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to relate that there's clearly a lot of willingness between the universities and business life to collaborate and do that more. So maybe it's more that, as you said, David, that it takes time and it goes step by step. For us also, we have, maybe not as a company so much, but as individuals and from the team who started and different parts of working life, of course, had deep connections with certain research teams at universities, which also have helped us a lot, maybe more informal ways. But now increasingly, we also have a lot of requests from universities when they are applying for funding for their projects. They need to demonstrate that there's business case to be used. They often would like to have us involved, and for us it's great because it's also kind of a low for a startup. It's a low commitment way to be involved, to kind of be supporting the research side, but then also have some new know-how to be infused in the company and be part of the being part of the community. So clearly, I would echo the other panelists that we need more of that collaboration, and especially on the applications that are closer to the business use. But that should not be away from the more like the basic research that can then on a longer term set foundations for new innovations.
Indeed. One important topic. We are running out of time. I think we have about 5 minutes. I'm sort of torn in between asking the audience to ask a question or lead you to ask a question on a specific thing, which is the green transition and the challenges that Finland is meeting with the 2035 net zero greenhouse gas emissions target. But David, perhaps you can give us a short comment about our challenges and what we need to do, and then the couple of minutes hopefully is saved for the audience.
Okay, so very briefly, I think Louise really highlighted the big sort of standout issue for Finland in international comparison is dealing with the land use change and forestry sector. You know, it's one of the most surprising things I think that I learned about Finland in this process is that the forest, that sector is not a sink anymore, it's emitting. And when you look at the numbers, I mean, the big reason is those emissions from soil and peatland soil. And as Louise said, that's probably we identified as dealing head on with a problem with those peatland soil emissions is the cheapest way to get emissions down. I mean, the research says that 10 euros a tonne of CO2 will have an abatement subsidies enough to reduce emissions in that area, and that over time you could pull down maybe 80% of the emissions from peatland soils and agriculture. That's 5 million tonnes, or about 1/3 of the gap that's probably between meeting the net zero target and not. So yeah, we really see that as the area where Finland needs to put its money to reduce emissions, as well as working on that longer term issue of increasing forest growth. I mean, the government's developing a forest growth package. Those things are important and should be implemented, but they're going to take time. And I think like there's a faster return, and so should be done at the same time as dealing with those peatland emissions. The gross emission side, we're pretty relaxed about in the sense that that's going well. You know, Finland's progressing well. It'll probably meet, you know, the non-LULUCF targets fine. It's really that LULUCF side. And final comment would be that target is super ambitious, right, internationally, and that shouldn't be forgotten. And so I think, you know, it should be seen as a stretch. I mean, I think it should. We've kept it there. The government's kept it there, but it's a stretch target. So if Finland doesn't hit it, well, you know, shouldn't be, I don't think the international community is going to be too hard because the international community is not trying as hard as that itself. So.
That's true as well. And there's also some pedaling back worldwide on this issue. So there has to be a pragmatic approach on this. And of course, Finland is doing great on the green transition as regards, or clean transition as regards energy sector. So indeed, a lot of windmills, and I guess solar panels as well, because our summer is special. So I mean, so cup is definitely half full, I would say. Now, really quick question from the audience, if somebody wants to ask something. Nope. Oh, go ahead. And please say your name as well.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent discussion. My name is Mia Hurta. I'm from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment. And I would like to go back to maybe the beginning where you talked about, Heidi, I think, talked about how the companies were prepared or in general the discussion around the resilience of our economy. Now, my question is maybe to David and Heidi, do you, since we have very high-tech frontier technology and innovative companies, and they are saying that, well, in some instances, we have to move out of Finland because of the EU. So my question is, do you see that the US protectiveness and the measures are actually inviting companies more to move to the US, move their production to the US? Have you heard about this? What is the general feeling? Is there anything that is pointing to a success in this strategy that the US is having at the moment? And on the other side, how do you see that the EU can actually manage, because it has started to its work on simplification of regulation and promoting innovation in the EU. So who will, in this geo-economic struggle, in the end, maybe which is the winning strategy? Will the EU be attractive, Or is the US
Thank you.
managing?
In order to
Yes.
have the answer, I think we
Okay,
have to.
I will. Thank you very much.
Excellent question, but you only have about one sentence or 1.5 sentences to answer. So summarize really quickly.
Yes. So I think that you can't point out who the clear winner is. You see some companies doing local supply chains more and more, and others not really doing changes. But I would say no clear winners, but more local is what we see.
Mika.
Flexibility of economy is required, and fortunately, for example, Finnish labor markets are quite flexible. People move from job to job, and this kind of creative destruction is one of the consequences of this kind of changes in policies, unfortunately.
Thanks, Mika. Oh, David, go ahead.
I guess I would say I'm going to put my money on the table and say Europe's going to win this, because like Europe's going on policy framework is going to be backing new technologies and going. US is basically moving away from transition, the green transition, sticking with the old oil economy. I think like the scientific facts are the globe's getting warmer. They're just going to be further behind in the net zero race. So I'm backing Europe on it.
Sarah, you get to finish. How do you feel? Are you optimistic about Finland and Europe?
I'm super optimistic, for sure. And for Finland especially, the transition to net zero is a great opportunity. And I know our company and many others are also doing best to deliver good economic growth and helping with the emission reduction targets.
Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed it. We just have too little time. Next time, organizers, much more time for the panel. Excellent panel. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. I wish you a wonderful day and have a really relaxing weekend, thinking about all the good things that Finland has.